Most people won't say this out loud, but almost everyone has thought it at least once. If I just had more money, life would finally calm down, stress would drop, options would open up, problems would shrink. And honestly, that thought feels reasonable because when you look around, money seems to fix a lot of very real pain. So today we're going to sit with the uncomfortable question people either oversimplify or avoid completely. Can money actually solve all of your life's problems, or is that just a comforting lie we tell ourselves when things feel tight?
FBI, open up!
Here's the tricky part. The answer is not a clean yes or no. Anyone who tells you it's one or the other is selling something. Either they're selling hustle fantasy or they're selling moral superiority. Real life sits in the messy middle. Money is absurdly powerful at solving certain categories of problems and completely useless at solving others. The confusion comes from mixing those categories together and expecting one tool to fix everything. Let's start with the obvious part people weirdly downplay. Money solves a massive number of problems that people pretend are emotional or personal, but are actually financial. If you can't pay rent, that's not a mindset issue. If you're avoiding the doctor because you're worried about the bill, that's not a self-love problem. If you're stuck in a job you hate because quitting means missing meals, that's not a passion problem. Those are money problems, and money fixes them directly and fast. When researchers talk about financial stress, they're not being poetic. Lack of money consumes mental bandwidth. It changes how the brain functions. Studies show that people under financial strain perform worse on cognitive tasks, not because they're less capable, but because part of their brain is constantly busy running survival math. Rent, food, gas, credit cards. When will the next paycheck hit? That background noise doesn't shut up. When money enters the picture, that noise drops. Not because life becomes perfect, but because your brain finally gets some quiet. This is why the often quoted idea that money can't buy happiness is both true and deeply misleading. Money absolutely buys relief. It buys stability. It buys options. And relief from constant stress feels a lot like happiness when you've been without it. That's why people who jump from struggling to comfortable often report massive increases in life satisfaction. Not because they bought a yacht, but because they stopped panicking. There's solid data behind this. Income increases have a strong impact on well-being up to the point where basic needs and reasonable comfort are covered. Housing security, healthcare, decent food, some buffer for emergencies, a little room for enjoyment. Once those boxes are checked, the curve flattens. Extra money still helps, but it helps less and less in terms of emotional payoff. This is where the first illusion kicks in. When you're below that comfort line, it feels like money would fix everything. Because most of what hurts right now is directly connected to not having it. So the brain does a lazy thing and assumes more money equals no problems. But what's actually happening is money is removing one entire class of problems. And that class happens to be loud and exhausting. Once those problems are gone, other problems step forward. And these ones don't respond to a bank transfer. Money does not teach you how to build healthy relationships. It does not make you emotionally mature. It does not automatically give your life meaning. It does not fix unresolved trauma. It does not stop loneliness. It does not guarantee purpose. It does not create self-respect. And it definitely does not tell you what to do with your time once survival stops being the main mission. In fact, money can expose those problems faster. When you're no longer distracted by survival stress, you start noticing the quiet stuff you ignored before. The job you don't hate but don't care about. The relationships that feel shallow. The boredom that creeps in when there's no urgent fire to put out. That's why you see people who are financially successful still feeling restless, anxious, or weirdly empty. Not because money failed them, but because money did exactly what it was supposed to do and then stepped aside. Another misunderstanding is thinking money creates freedom in every direction. Money does buy freedom from certain constraints. You can leave bad environments, you can buy time, you can say no more often. But freedom also creates responsibility. When there's no obvious next step dictated by necessity, you have to choose. And choice is uncomfortable. A lot of people discover that they were using struggle as structure. Remove the struggle and suddenly they're staring at a wide open calendar wondering what any of it is for. This is where the narrative gets flipped incorrectly. People notice wealthy individuals who are unhappy and conclude money doesn't matter. That's nonsense. Money matters a lot. It just doesn't matter in the way people expect. It's a foundation, not a finish line, a really important one, but still just the base layer. Think of money like oxygen. When you don't have enough, it's all you think about. When you have enough, you don't notice it at all. And when someone tells you oxygen doesn't matter, because breathing won't give your life meaning. They're technically correct and practically useless. Another thing money does extremely well is reduce vulnerability. It gives you margin. If your car breaks down, it's annoying instead of catastrophic. If you get sick, you focus on getting better instead of negotiating bills. If you want to learn a new skill, you can afford the time and tools. That margin compounds quietly. Over years, it changes the trajectory of your life in ways that are hard to see in the moment. But margin also reveals character. Money amplifies what's already there. If you're generous, you can be more generous. If you're anxious, you can become more anxious in different ways. If you avoid problems, you can avoid them more comfortably. That's why money doesn't magically turn people into better versions of themselves. It just gives them a louder microphone. There's also the expectation problem. Many people don't actually want money. They want what they think money represents: respect, safety, control, validation. When they finally get the money and still feel insecure or unfulfilled, they assume something went wrong. But the mistake was outsourcing internal needs to an external tool. Money is incredible at solving mechanical problems, logistics, access, time, safety, choice. It is terrible at solving existential ones: meaning, identity, belonging, direction. Confusing the two leads to disappointment on both sides. People without money feel trapped. People with money feel cheated. And then there's comparison. Money changes the comparison game, but doesn't end it. You stop comparing yourself to people struggling and start comparing yourself to people ahead of you. Bigger house, smarter investments, more status, better lifestyle. The finish line moves. This isn't a moral failure. It's human wiring. Relative position matters to the brain. Money raises the floor, but does not silence the scoreboard. One of the quietest truths is that money solves your problems, then hands you better problems. Instead of worrying about bills, you worry about time. Instead of survival, you worry about fulfillment. Instead of scarcity, you worry about impact. Those problems are not worse. They're just different, and they require different tools. This is why the idea of money solving all of life's problems feels true at one stage of life and false at another. Early on, money feels like the missing piece because it is. Later, it feels overrated because the remaining problems lie elsewhere. There's also a cultural layer here. We tend to romanticize struggle and demonize wealth in the same breath. Struggle builds character, money corrupts. Reality is less dramatic. Prolonged financial stress damages people. It doesn't ennoble them. And money doesn't corrupt by default, it just removes friction. What you do with that freedom is on you. So can money solve all of your life's problems? No. And anyone promising that is lying or confused. But can money solve a huge portion of the problems that make life unnecessarily painful? Absolutely. Ignoring that is just as dishonest. The more useful question is what money is for. Money is a tool to reduce friction between you and the life you want to build. It's not the blueprint, it's not the purpose, it's not the scorecard. It's leverage. Powerful leverage. Dangerous if misunderstood, essential if used well. When you see money clearly, you stop asking it to be your therapist or your identity. You let it do what it does best: create stability, buy time, open doors, reduce fear. Then you handle the rest with different tools. Relationships, values, skills, self-awareness. Those don't show up in your bank account, but they quietly determine how satisfying your life feels once the money problem is mostly handled. The tragedy isn't people wanting money. The tragedy is people thinking money will tell them who to be. It won't. It never has. What it will do is give you the space to find out. And that space, when used well, is worth more than most people realize. So no, money can't solve all of your life's problems. But pretending it doesn't solve many of the most brutal ones is just intellectual posturing. Money won't give your life meaning. But it can remove the chaos that makes meaning impossible to chase in the first place. And that distinction matters more than any slogan ever will.